most exciting aspects of bringing new characters into Magic the Gathering is the endless potential for fresh narratives. Does the character bolster a plane's existing lore, or add depth to an established tribe? Or do we get a brief glimpse into something new entirely? Luckily for us, this set seems to have it all. Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And we are on our third consecutive episode talking about Commander Legends, not including all of the times we spoke about it in previous episodes up until now. Are you bored about talking about Commander Legends yet?
No, it's a continuing saga. I like this. This is life now.
Yeah, I'm still really stoked. When Ikoria came out earlier this year, was it this year? God, what is time?
Yeah.
When Ikoria came out, I'll be honest with you, I enjoy doing our lore episodes, but even that, I was kind of done with the plane by the time we got there. And I really liked Ikoria. It's just if you talk about it so much and over and over and over in different episodes, you start to get a bit like lethargic talking about it. And I am still so not over Commander Legends. I mean, we're recording this on Friday the 20th of November 2020. So our non-pre-release boxes of Magic, because you and I didn't manage to get any pre-release stock, whatever a pre-release is now. It's only now officially able to be sold. So saying that I'm tired about talking about it might seem a little bit glib. But, you know, on the lead up, we already knew what the card gallery was a few weeks ago. So, yeah, I'm still all in. I played against some Commander Legends cards last night during the EDH spell table session. People already had their product. Have you faced off against many Commander Legends stuff?
I haven't yet, no. We did like a little budget build within our stores group, and then everyone did like a sealed deck, but they obviously all got their pre-release stuff, and I still am yet to. I told people boldly that I'll be ready by Friday. It hasn't arrived yet.
I mean, I'm in the same group. I said exactly the same thing. So yeah, we both look like complete dicks. I think one of the guys last night played an Abomination of Llanowar deck, a Golgari deck, which. Yeah, I wasn't huge on it as a Golgari commander because there are some pretty strong ones out there, and this one did pretty well, to be honest with you. It functioned really well. I think it was the upgraded 100-card version of the 60-card sealed deck that he made. So, yeah, really cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, very cool.
Last week, we spoke about the old lore, or the lore which was already established for a lot of the characters that got their first cards in Commander Legends, or maybe if some of them didn't get their first cards, or maybe the first cards that we felt really represented that character really well. This week, we are going to continue on with the lore episodes, and we are going to do the new lore for creatures that have got legendary cards in this set that come from no established lore. So they might have some lore background in terms of they come from a plane that's already known about and already established in Magic. Some of them come from planes where we don't know where they come from, so it could be a new place or it could be an already established place, but we just don't know that they fit into that little realm. But these are going to be characters that we have not seen before on flavor text, on previous cards, on other spells, or as far as I'm aware, in any of the literature. Now, Magic literature, as much as we bemoan not having much nowadays, there is quite a deep and extensive back catalogue of books and articles and fan fiction and whatnot that a lot of world-building teams pull from when they're making new quote-unquote characters for Magic. So if we do get some of these wrong, I can only apologise now, but I'm pretty certain after doing a lot of research into these characters and a lot of kind of digging into where we could find their names on cards or in books or whatever, I'm pretty sure almost all of these are completely fresh new characters. So yeah, this is the new lore episode. Again, like last week, we haven't gone through all of them, because I'm not interested in making a 3-hour podcast. I don't think you're interested in listening to a 3-hour podcast out there. I mean, if you are, tell us, but we're still not going to do it. So we are going to do our top 6. So much like last week where we had 6 slots, we doubled up with some pairings of characters of cards that we thought were really important, that they got their first proper creature card. This week we're going to do the same, but for the new ones, for designs or characters or whatever that we feel are really fresh and exciting for the game in a myriad of different ways. But yeah, these will be our top 6 each. So you're still getting 12 slots with potentially more than 12 characters if we double up. So stop whinging. Why are you coming at us? Stop hating us on Twitter. No one's at us on Twitter about this. No one's getting angry. If anything, our community of listeners is very supportive and we love you all. But, stop going on at us.
You are a self-contained argument. It's fantastic. I love it.
I sometimes think that if I didn't argue with myself under the guise of other people arguing with me, I'd actually be a lot less stressful in my life, and probably be a lot happier.
How far are we going with fixing that? Have we tried the alternative at all?
Not even once, no.
Yeah, I didn't think so. well, hey ho, it's fine. This is good. We'll consider this therapy sessions. It's fine.
It's more fun this way. It's more fun this way.
Exactly.
Cool. I mean, so I've got 6 slots. Have you doubled up on any? Have you got any like part?
Doubled up on one. Yeah, on one. It's
yes.
pretty obvious.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear about those guys. I mean, I've got my 6 here ready to go. Do you want to just crack on?
Yeah, do you want to start or should I start?
I will start because you started last week, so I will start this one. Everything is fair. Okay, so my first brand new character to Magic that I'm really excited for and really want to see more of as well is Blim Comedic Genius. So Blim Comedic Genius is 2 generic black-red for a 4/3 legendary creature imp. Our first imp that at legendary status. Blim has flying. Whenever Blim Comedic Genius deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of target permanent you control. Then each player loses life and discards cards equal to the number of permanents they don't own. Art by Jason A. Engel, which is worth noting because it's really cool artwork. So we have basically another Zedru card. So Zedru the Great-Hearted was a commander where you give away permanents to other players as well. A lot of people are saying this is like the anti-Zedru from a design perspective, but it's not really the anti-Zedru, is it? It's still, Zedru didn't give you things when they gave you the permanents away. So this
is like conversion triggers, but like they still work within the same idea of play pattern.
Yeah,
they're just going to have slightly different effects.
Yeah,
one's affecting your opponent negatively, whereas Zedru obviously affected you positively.
Yeah, so Zedru was like kind of a group hug commander, and we all know group hug commanders really aren't group hug commanders. They are group hug commanders.
Group hug.
Yeah, group hug stab you in the back. That's what a real group hug deck is.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas, Blim, obviously being in Rakdos colours, has the black in there. Zedru was Jeskai, I believe. So yeah, kind of different sort of shells, but same idea. As a character, Blim is a member of the Rakdos cult on Ravnica. So last week we spoke about Jury, master of the review, who ran a review and ran a club which the Rakdos kind of performed in. Blim, ostensibly, is one of these performers in the Rakdos cult. So, like I said, they are the first legendary imp. They are a comedian first and foremost. And in true Rakdos fashion, Blim often boasts that his act slays the audience. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He probably goes around killing his audience members as well. Nice little wordplay there. He's considered by many to actually be a bit of a hack, but his little lore blurb suggests that if you heckle him and if you kind of get rowdy at his shows, that's okay. But as soon as you throw something, he has quote unquote been known to throw sharp objects back. So yeah, he's one of these kind of, sore losers, bit of a hack, terrible comedian, but in Rakdos fashion, doesn't think twice about killing you before, to kill off his audience. Like, that's actually part of the show. I absolutely love this. I was saying last week, again with Jury, that I want to see more like performative artists represented in legendary creatures. Like we said on the before, both you and I come from a theatric background, and so seeing characters and legendary creature cards that still work within the realms of like combat or still work within the realms of the game functionality are artists or poets or actors or musicians or whatever else. And sometimes we get a card like Yisam Wandering Bard, right? Where he's a musician, he's literally a bard, that's his title. But the way that they've kind of worked it is that they've have him being able to summon and control creatures, because that's what his harp does, his lyre, right? So that's his ability. And that kind of works. You don't necessarily have to make him like a musician. But I guess it's kind of hard that unless you want to make a whole new mechanic to represent what a performer does, like make up a new kind of counter, for example, like a lore counter. Like, what would you do? Would you do like a play script counter if you were doing like a playwright or something? It's kind of hard, so I do understand it.
Yeah.
But then the other side of things is when you get a character like Hoatli, warrior poet, who is literally within her society on Ixalan. She is an orator. She's a poet who recounts the glories of the Sun Empire, and she kind of, performs them out as well as being an established warrior. But her character as a planeswalker, and all her planeswalker cards, does nothing really about the theatrical poet side of her title. It's all about her affinity for dinosaurs and warriors. So to see creature cards like Jury and like Blim that are more representative of what they do as an act, I think is really encouraging. And as his design is, I think it's kind of a stretch, maybe slightly, for a comedian to be giving things away and then blowing, like the permanents basically blow up in your face.
I like the idea that it's almost like he's giving you a joke and then the punchline hits you.
Yes, they see that is very cool, and I do like that, and that is they kind of crowbarred it in. I also made a note of saying that it does fit in very much with the kind of Halloween-y trick or treat aspects that the Rakdos kind of fall into.
Yeah.
I know they're not like the spooky kooky guild per se, but if they were to have any holiday that they would be affiliated to, I'm pretty certain it would be Halloween. You know, so the idea that he gives away things that are meant to be nice, like his jokes, you're quite right, that end up blowing up the audience faces and maiming them, or like you don't like the gift because it's not a very funny joke, so you get hurt because of it because he doesn't like people not laughing at his jokes. So I think it's slightly convoluted, but if you are going to make a Rakdos comedian, this is exactly the kind of thing that I think you should be doing. So I really like Blim. I mean, just also imps are just cool, man. Like they've got really flippant names and they are cheeky, but Blim.
Yeah,
I love it. I
can imagine him being. I can imagine him playing to the audience. It's a shame that his artwork doesn't actually play him in front of an audience. I also like the idea that his ability is almost like when clowns give you that flower and then you go to sniff it and it squirts water in your face.
Yeah.
Like I can see it representing a lot of different aspects of comedy. I just think that maybe the issue here is that the artwork doesn't necessarily play towards a whimsical comedic response. It's more just no offense to Engel, because I think his artwork's amazing, but that could just be any old imp.
This is true. I think he does have a lot of character. Like he's got a big sort of rictus grin on his face, and he's clearly in sort of some sort of Rakdos hangout. But I think maybe the art direction was focusing too much on the character and not maybe enough on the setting to really sell it as a performer. Yeah. But then I think this is maybe the problem with all like characters that are maybe have a job, if you like, is it's very hard to show them being like grandiose in their job unless their job is something like warlord or king, for example. If you give someone like who it's just kind of tough. But I think a good step forwards to having these kinds of characters like Jury and Blim respectively, and a really cool new character to Magic that I hope they continue using in the future.
Yeah, very much so. Anytime they give a creature type that hasn't had one, a legendary creature, they're doing good things. Speaking of which, we've got some more anthropomorphized wizards coming over the hill. So I'm going to start talking about Arkelos and Quain. Yes. I'm getting like the big gun out of the way fairly early. The thing that's nice about Arkelos, so Arkelos Lagoon Mystic is 1 and soul tie, so black, green, blue for a 2/4 Turtle Shaman, obviously legendary. As long as he is tapped, other permanents enter the battlefield tapped, and as long as he is untapped, other permanents enter the battlefield untapped. Flavor text: life is not a race. So, and then Quain, his counterpart is Quain Itinerant Meddler. Itinerant meaning that he flies from place to place. He is a 1/3 legendary rabbit wizard, which is automatically awesome.
Rabbit wizard, love it.
Rabbit wizard, yeah. I mean, my biggest criticism of Quain is that the first time I wanted Rabbit Wizard, I wanted to see the wizard that created the Wizardrix, and I thought this is going to be the first time that we see the Wizardrix creator, because that would have been a really cool deep cut. Never mind, there's still time. Wizardrix hasn't died yet.
But that would be a rabbit wizard, as in a wizard of rabbits, not a rabbit wizard, a wizard who is a rabbit. Do you see?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's super clear. Yeah. No, I know. I get what you mean. It's a rabbit who happens to be a wizard, not a wizard who got turned into a rabbit. Yeah. No, I get you. But you can't put wizard rabbit because the class always has to come afterwards. See, they shoehorn themselves into these mechanical corridors that allow no freedom of movement. Where's the artistic creativity, Mr. Man? Anyway, he's a 1/3 taps that have each player may draw a card, then each player who did draw a card this way gains a life for a blue and a white. The interesting thing about these two is they play obviously to the cliche of the tortoise and the hare dynamic from Aesop's Fables. The idea that slow and steady wins the race. Or as I like to see it, is that if you keep going, even though it's really difficult and it might take a long time, you're going to get further than the person who shoots for the stars immediately and then quits before they even finish. I don't, it's basically the same thing with more flamboyance, but I mean, I like to think it's more than just take your time. It's more keep at it. Anyway, point being that they obviously have played this dynamic that the Arkelos is they call him a chronarch. Essentially, he's working with time magic. The thing that's interesting about him is he's got more of like a natural affinity with chronomancy, whereas it's more like an innate interaction with the world around him, rather than say Giora or Teferi, which use like forged like manipulation, like they've learnt the craft of
yeah, they're
of messing with
temporal
time.
mages. Yeah,
Exactly. Whereas he's almost like inherent and part of himself. The thing that I like about this is it's almost like, because it's like an innate power and it is considerable, like it warps the world around him to make it a slower pace. Like it feels similar power levels to like Aminatu, of where like she has like a track into a form of magic that is super, super dangerous. Like we see this in like other IPs like Marvel, like superhero things, where someone has like say Captain Marvel, for example, like you can have exponentially way stronger abilities than, I guess he's got claws, you know? So I feel like this is one of those situations where his inherent ability, if it wasn't for the fact that he's not particularly malicious, and he seems to be kind of like distant from everything around him, like it could be very, very dangerous. Because the effect that it has not only in a lore state is extreme, but within the game is really extreme as well, because the ability to be able to force everyone's everything to come in either tapped or untapped based on, all you have to do is throw an enchantment on him that taps or untaps him for an activated ability, and you can wreak havoc across the entire table. Obviously, coming to play tap lands become really abusive, that kind of thing. It's almost like they didn't think Solday had enough different directions for value, so they went, hey, have some untapped tap shenanigans coming in. The reason why I do like it is because it does feel almost like, it feels almost like Fae in the way that it does it. It's almost like a glamour. Like anyone who comes into contact with him slows down to his pace as well automatically. It's almost like that scene in Lord of the Rings where Merry and Pippin want the tree folk to or the Ents, sorry, to hurry up in their conversation, and they're like, "We've only just said hello.
Yeah,
like calm down, young whippersnappers." And I like this idea, and it's the juxtaposition between him and obviously Quain. Quain being super, super quick, like going hell for leather, but acting essentially like, I mean, we've done like 4 different IPs within this blurb already, but it's kind of similar to the White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland, you know, being late for a very important date. The thing I don't like about Quain compared to Arkelos is because as much as mechanically he's pushing everyone to draw cards, it's a may, so they don't actually have to. It's a decision that they can make, whereas I feel like it should be pushed. I feel like it should be a forced action. I also feel like it should have either flash or haste, because again, like that ability to be, nothing about him particularly denotes super, super, super quickness in any way, shape or form. He can't activate his ability the turn he comes in, which feels like a miss to me. All he's doing is making everyone kind of do a single thing. It doesn't feel like acceleration necessarily. And I feel like maybe because of that, if he is like this impulsive character, maybe he should have been white red instead of white blue. Like this idea of being impulsive, you've got impulsive draw. If everyone had the ability to tap, each player exiles the top card of their library, they may play that card until the end of their next go. If they do play that card, something happens. That I think would be way cooler. Forcing the entire table to do impulsive draw, I think, is really interesting. The reason I say that is because I think it's quite a generic, crappy kind of Azorius ability. And I feel like kind of similar to Jury, like there are better options for you in Azorius to do this, and it doesn't necessarily speak to his character as much as you. I feel like he could have made a more nuanced ability.
Sure.
Whereas with Arkelos, not only is it a really strong, powerful ability that hasn't necessarily been seen before, it plays directly into kind of his character of forcing everyone to go at his pace, which I think is very interesting.
I do think though that these are definitely more design of character over design of function, though, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are deliberately. What I've put here is I think it's an interest. We don't know where they're from, and I think it's kind of interesting that they've gone straight anthropomorphization with the fact that they do still have like human-y hands, but they're very much animals first rather than being humans that have an animalistic characteristic to them. They are very much the animal that's, you know, developed evolution wise. You know, a great debate of what's the difference between a cat and a leonin, for example. So where is a question. I'm not entirely sure because we have nothing to go on. I mean, a common theme going forwards for me is going to be maybe Strixhaven, mostly because I think I'm really excited about seeing that plane, and maybe this could work towards that. But I feel like it's more of a natural plane. I could have seen these being in Eldraine. if it wasn't for the fact that Eldraine kind of separates their animals and their humans out quite differently. So
Mm.
what I've put down is it's likely that just nebulous characters with interesting concepts that won't be followed up on. If we do follow up on it, that plane's going to be really interesting. It feels a little bit like Lorwyn, this idea of like the Aurora changing night and day, Arkelos being able to like slow down time. That idea, the fact you've got a genuine rabbit wizard, like it's cool concepts, and I feel like these are like little drops of where they're going to see whether people react to them. I don't necessarily think they have plans for them immediately in the future, but they could come back to this. Oh, okay, actually, people are okay with animals being, anthropomorphized, which we have been for the entire time. Wizards listen, and then maybe we'll go back to that plane and see them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like the design. I think they're a little bit on the nose of the Aesop's Fable parable. But yeah, I think they're really cool. Quain and Arkelos. People went nuts for Arkelos, especially, because everyone just loves
God,
him.
yeah.
Well, also, he's a turtle wizard, but even though he's really a tortoise...
well, he's a turtle shaman.
Turtle shaman, sorry. But he's a tortoise.
It's
he's not a turtle.
No, let's not start this again.
Yeah,
because Quain looks like a hare to me. But anyway, let's move on.
Let's move on. So my next one is this is the artwork where people just went, "What the fuck is Commander Legends going to be about?" The next one I've got up is the Prismatic Piper. So Prismatic Piper is a 5 colorless for a 3/3 legendary creature shapeshifter at common. If the Prismatic Piper is your commander, choose a color before the game begins. The Prismatic Piper is the chosen color, and it has partner. The flavor text reads, "It is everything and nothing." So, the artwork as well, it should be noting, is by Seb McKinnon. So this is the artwork where it shows the... I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, you will... I mean, I don't know what you've been doing, really, around Commander Legends. This is the kind of snake-like, almost... elemental, I guess. It's a shapeshifter, but it has elemental kind of vibes, where it's got the different colors of magic forming through different sort of elements, I guess. So you have like the kind of black smoke, you into blue water, into green tree, into red flame, into white something. I have no idea what the white section of his body is.
I like how you do that with the white something. That's just basically mechanical white.
White, very good.
Whatever it does.
And he's got like a kind of mask-like face that he's holding, and he's holding a pipe or a flute into kind of spindly little arms. It's crazy. And again, this is the artwork where when people saw it, they were like, "Is this a legendary creature? Is it a spell? Who knows?" The Prismatic Piper, from a lore perspective, is a spirit of pure mana that can be accessed by magic users across the multiverse to cast spells they previously would not have been able to cast. So it literally adds mana to their abilities. So if you're primarily a green mage, you might find yourself suddenly being able to cast black mana spells. It's not exactly a creature, as in like how like a Leonin is a creature, or like how a human is a creature within the lore, but it's kind of the concept that researchers across the multiverse have placed on this phenomenon of being able to use mana that you didn't previously have access to. And it's based on the idea that these mages, when they're in a great time of stress and they suddenly throw out a black spell that they haven't been able to cast before, this has been foreshadowed by them hearing loud pipe music being played from somewhere, like they hear it in their head, and then as soon as this phenomenon finishes, they lose all knowledge of how to use the mana that they couldn't previously access. And this has been something that has been noted across the multiverse. Quite how, as an objective observer looking at the multiverse, these different researchers know that it's something that's been accessed across the multiverse. Or maybe they don't, and maybe that's just something we know. There's always a little bit of a weird meta-narrative going on there.
Yeah. It's like a narrator sitting there going, "Let me tell you a story of the multiverse."
Yeah, I think maybe it's just that this phenomenon has been noticed on multiple planes, so we as the players know that. And so the Prismatic Piper, whilst it is a embodiment of this kind of random mana that kind of pops up from time to time, it's not necessarily a creature. And it's said that it doesn't have its own will, so it is literally a manifestation of pure mana, much more than, say, elementals or avatars. I've put down here that this is interesting that he can, that the spirit can be anywhere in the multiverse, because that is very much like the Dragon or Arabo or Eldrazi. I say Arabo, I think that's just the headcanon that most people have put onto Arabo, that he's like the Urcat. I don't actually think that's exactly what he is.
I think it's kind of been semi confirmed that he is like there is an chair out there, for example, like the chair of chairs that represents
Sure.
all chairs throughout the world. So I think there is a degree of canon to that.
Fair enough. So this might be like the mana. This could be very much be the thing that is mana across the multiverse. So I think the lore is super interesting, and I think we need more characters like this, because as much as it's a lot cleaner just to have planeswalkers and creatures and Eldrazi that can flit across the blind eternities to different verses in the multiverse, it doesn't make sense that would be the case. If there is access between, if these realms are physical spaces within the blind eternities, it makes a lot of sense that there are many phenomena that can go in between them. And I think this is a really good representation of one of them. Just the whole thing is just really unique and interesting.
I was going to say, it feels like they tried to justify, so they obviously had to make this card to fit for the limited format, the idea being that, okay, you as a mage, and it almost felt like a little tongue-in-cheek where they're saying, oh, suddenly that mage suddenly knew how to use black mana, and obviously if you draft a load of green cards and you suddenly have some black cards, you're like, Prismatic Piper, help! So I think I like that meta-narrative quite a lot, but I also, I like the idea that it's... that it creates almost a more interesting character because they had to force a story that met the needs mechanically. And then it creates questions of like, what do you mean it can exist anywhere and everywhere? What do you mean it just comes and goes throughout the multi? That's actually kind of funny that they obviously they have to fabricate a story for something that's almost like mundane, because it has to be in the set to make the set work. That actually creates more interesting lore than, say, any of the other characters potentially do.
Yeah, I mean, the function of it is, this is, I think, for me, pure flavor, because the function of it is exactly what we need in terms of function, and they've made the flavor fit for what it does. But a little bit anti to what we're saying with Blim, where they kind of have to crowbar one or the other in to kind of fit the other one. This is a character which does exactly the thing which we need it to do on the battlefield, and I kind of feel like that's all we've been talking about for the past year on this podcast, is exactly that. How does the bit of cardboard as a play piece work as a narrative? And this is exactly it. The only other meta thing where I'm a little bit like, oh, they really need to clean this up or need to pick a lane, and this kind of branches out to the entirety of Magic really as a game. It adds the color to the color identity of your deck. So if you're playing like a blue partner, you partner this up with it, you can add another color, so suddenly it becomes like a red-blue deck or whatever else. Is the commander, like, is your creature as the commander the character that's leading the deck, or are you, the player, the person which is having the color added to it? Because the Prismatic Piper is not, it's not partnering you, the player, it's partnering your other creature.
The Yeah, I have it that say, for example, you have say Blim. Let's say, for example, Blim, and you wanted to play Blim in a way that used Zedruu, and so you wanted all like the blue donate effects. I like the idea that the Prismatic Piper is allowing Blim, who wanted to pilot the deck of giving away all your stuff but didn't have the access to the blue, and the Prismatic Piper is the one who's in that instance. You're playing almost the instance that Blim gets the inspiration of blue of going, I need better ways to donate my stuff. And then the Prismatic Piper comes and goes, oh, let me help you with blue mana. And I feel like it's adding to the magic of your commander. It's not adding to the magic of you.
Sure, but then is your library your commander's library, or is that your library? Are you summoning your commander? This is, I mean, this is the whole thing, right?
Those are questions we don't necessarily have answers to, and I think that we have to kind of create our own meta narrative. And I think it's fairly agreed upon. It's only people that like dig their heels in, and then someone else digs their heels in on a separate on a converse issue, and then that's where you kind of maybe create problems, because there is no definitive going, no, it says here that this is right, so you're wrong. Which again, that's a whole conversation.
I mean, exactly. I wasn't looking to go too deep onto it. That was the question that when I saw this card and I really broke down its flavor, and I went, yeah, that's 100% correct. I went, it's 99.9% satisfactory to me. There's a 0.1% where I'm still going, but what even is a planeswalker? Are you summoning the planeswalker? So yeah,
having existential crises over your guys. Like, what is mana?
Yeah,
how do I tap a swamp?
Yeah, is mana different to ether? What about ley lines? And it would just do this whole thing. Yeah, energy. Like, exactly. Surely energy is just condensed ether, which is the mana of Kaladesh.
It's when I first saw energy cards in Pokemon, I was like, what the fuck is double energy normal? What is rainbow energy? What is this game? Yeah, exactly.
You don't know what they're doing.
Explain yourself. Yeah, no. Cool. I feel like if you're going to be that deep down in these things, obviously they do still have D&D that you can go and be anal about your lore and your narrative. Magic, unfortunately, does have to at some point sit within some open rule specification. But as you say, this does a very good job of ticking basically every single box, marrying the two together.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, that's the Prismatic Piper. There is a lot of lore there. I will just say as well, we're about like half an hour into the episode. A lot of the lore we've gotten from are the articles that Wizards have put up on the mothership, where they've been doing, since Theros, they've been doing these lore slide things. I feel like these ones for Commander Legends are a bit more fleshed out than they usually are, especially for certain characters, like the Prismatic Piper. Some of them don't get a lot, and some of them are on this list that don't really get a lot of lore. But then there are sort of resources and stuff that have been extrapolated from these articles that are elsewhere online. So yeah, if you do want to see the full list of all these different lore bits, the first place that you should look is actually WotC, which is not really a big a thing that we would say often. But yeah,
surprisingly.
I would say for this set, as much as again it's not a book or a set of web fiction or whatever, as far as the lore slide dynamic goes that they've been doing for the past year or so, this has been a fairly decent version of that. But yeah, so that's where we're getting a lot of this lore from, as well as also just being flavor nerds who put our own thing on it as well. Cool. What have you got next?
Well, here we go again. I'm going to talk about Gen. I know. I'm sorry. 1 second. Again, I have multiple infinite. Arcanum Weaver. Gen Arcanum Weaver. He's Mardu, so red, white, black for a 2/3 human wizard. He has an activated ability: red, white, black, tap, sack an enchantment, return target enchantment from your graveyard to the battlefield. I'm going to read his flavor text now because I'm going to come back to it in a second. Any apprentice with a spell book and 2 sticks can churn out a fireball. This is different. This is art. Now he's really interesting. Interesting for a few different reasons. The artwork by Kieran Yanna. We've mentioned this, I think, last week, of where the artwork specifically, because there is a typical aesthetic and established aesthetic that certain cards will have certain color palettes, and obviously a red, white, blue card will look better having red, white, and blue hues in it, just to denote its wedge or whatever. Unless you're going specifically for, I don't even know, even like something like Grixis has a very specific look to it, which is purpley, which is red and blue together. So I mean, I think there is an established aesthetic norm to cards, and Gen kind of goes against this. There's a lot of purple, a lot of blue in the artwork, but he's kind of crafting it together into like this kind of goldeny color. So it kind of doesn't look very much like a typical Mardu mage. The problem with that is that we only really have seen like Mardu mages, like apart from like back in the day when maybe you had a couple of wedge kind of cards, like you've only seen it really in Khans of Tarkir, Dragons of Tarkir. Tarkir is a plane. Now, Tarkir is very specific in the fact that clans, in the same way that the shards from Alara, they kind of define a very specific field to certain colours, when actually, realistically, Mardu can be a wide spectrum of different effects and abilities. So it's quite interesting to me that it looks very much like a Jeskai monk, but is very clearly not a Jeskai monk. Like, it's got similar, and what I put is glowing eyes. I tried to feel like a better way to say that, like ocular illumination, which that just sounds sushi. Magic, you know what I mean? Like, it's just magic eyes.
Yeah.
And I don't think most of the mages or most of the Jeskai monks had the magic eye kind of look necessarily. They felt more grounded in martial arts, being able to like use the flow of chi and that kind of thing to channel your energy. To me, this is the one that screams to me Strixhaven, mostly because his lore slide talks a lot about how he has the ability to snatch other people's magic from the air and reweave it to his own whim. To me, not only is that a really, really cool idea and something I want to talk about in a second, but the thing I like about it is it kind of denotes a formal training ground to me, this idea that everyone's practicing in the same kind of space and he can take someone else's magic from the air and recraft it into something else. It doesn't sound like he's using it, say, necessarily offensively, as he's using it kind of to show off, in the same way that his flavor text kind of has this denotion of that he's showing off, he's being quite indignant about it. He's not a particularly humble person. The other reason I think it's maybe Strixhaven, because I know that we're going to have MDFCs, the model dual face cards, or whatever the terminology for them is, returning in Kaldheim and Strixhaven, the next 2 sets. I feel like Strixhaven is likely where they're going to look at MDFCs for enchantments. Because obviously we had lands, we had sorceries, creatures, and instants for for Zendikar Rising, and I feel like maybe we'll look at equipment and things like that for Kaldheim. Maybe they do enchantment MDFCs for Strixhaven, in which case Gen kind of fits quite nicely into that already. The reason I mentioned his flavor text earlier is because, again, you might be a smart, indignant kind of guy, but a fireball isn't an enchantment. And he says any apprentice spellbook and 2/6 can churn out a fireball, and but you work with enchantments, buddy, not with sorceries. So sort that out for one. The reason I also like this is because reweaving enchantments is really cool because enchantments are strangely intangible, and they're really broad in terms of magic mechanics. Like compare Sanguine Bond to Legion's Landing to Phyrexian Arena to Frontier Siege. How are any of those enchantments? Some of them are actions. Some of them Phyrexian Arena is a fucking building. Like, how is that an enchantment? Legion's Landing. What the fuck is that an enchantment? You just stepped onto land. You know, the reason I get indignant is because it's kind of interesting that we don't have a lot of clarity in terms of like defining enchantments as what they are, and I like that Gen kind of has this idea of where he could reweave enchantment magic, and there's a potential to maybe get a little bit more elucidation about it. The same thing if we're going to be working with MDFC enchantments in Strixhaven. Again, I'm making massive conjecture here, but if all of this does work together, maybe we look into the lore of enchantments, how they're established, how like you can pick apart their magics and all that nonsense. I think it's a similar design space to like Dak or Davriel, of where they have they're hijacking other people's magic or taking on the attributes of other people's magic. So it might help. We might not get metaphysical understanding of how the prismatic piper works in the where and when of the multiverse, but we might get some mechanical understanding of the spellcraft of enchantments and exactly what and how that works, which to me is quite exciting.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like all these kind of sort of mages that can manipulate things, and this seems to be a theme that they used a lot in Commander Legends. There's quite a lot of like mages and wizards that can kind of change things that are already established. So I think it's kind of cool, and it is a really nice new direction for the colors. Yeah, very cool indeed.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to have a crack at doing a 3-color commander that has also completely blown the doors wide open on a new archetype, and that is Obeka, Brute Chronologist. So we got our second chronologist. Obeka is 1 generic, blue, black, red, Grixis. Legendary creature, Ogre Wizard, our second Ogre Wizard ever printed at Legendary in Magic.
After Yidris? Is Yidris is the other one?
The Maelstrom... Yeah.
Yeah, look at that memory.
Yeah.
Cool, carry on.
Well, he was the lead singer of that Precon deck.
Of course, yeah. I thought in my mind, I now have him as the lead singer. I have
Maelstrom Wonder.
What's his name? Yeah, no, I have a metal band in my head, and now Yidris is the lead singer of it. Yeah, in my mind.
Obeka is a 3/4 legendary creature ogre wizard. The abilities text is very simple. Tap. The player whose turn it is may end the turn. And the reminder text is exile all spells and abilities from the stack. The player whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size. Damage wears off, and this turn, quote unquote, and until end of turn, quote unquote, effects end. And her flavor text is I'm bored with now. And the artwork on this one is by Jesper Icing, and we see Obeka punching through time, I guess.
I'll just that word, that's fine. Leave it at that. That needs no extrapolation. Punching through time. Exactly.
The reason I think we're mentioning the artworks on these ones a bit more than we did last week with the established lore is because obviously art is something that you get a lot of lore and a lot of flavour from. So if all we have to go off is the art and some of the new lore slides, you kind of need to sort of think about what the artwork's doing as well. Yeah, the reason I love Obeka, because temporal mages aren't a new thing, chronologists aren't a new thing. Heck, we've just spoken about the fact that there's another one in this set and how it fits into things around Magic. The thing
we get them all the time.
We get them all the time, but I'm not stopping for that one. But the thing I like about Obeka is that her brand of temporal magic makes no fucking sense and is completely bonkers and is the biggest load of what I like to call Doctor Who nonsense. Timey-wimey stuff, which I'm going to get a lot of backlash from this. I am not a huge fan of Doctor Who precisely because they fudge over so much of what goes on in that show. And yet, ironically, this card is that lore-wise, and I'm kind of here for it. And now I may be thinking I need to go and start watching Doctor Who, and maybe I've been a bit wrong. Maybe I've been wrong all this time. So Obeka is from an unknown plane, as far as we know, and is a temporal mage, who is kind of like the anti-Teferi. So Teferi is someone who went to Teleria and studied time magic and got involved in a time bubble, and he has like a whole like learned thing that he's had to kind of throughout the years do. And nowadays, even though he starts off being mischievous, nowadays he's very careful with how he treats time and phasing things in and out of reality, since he essentially murdered his entire continent through doing so. We'll gloss over that one. Teferi's a hero. She can manipulate time literally through brute force. So when we say she's punching through time, that's not us trying to like fudge over what that means. That's literally what she does. So there's things like in her lore slide, it says that if you get punched by her, your mother will feel it in the past. If she knocks your teeth out in the now, your baby teeth when you were a baby will also get knocked out. They offer up no meta narrative as to how that works or how
That's crazy strong. Like, time magic is nothing to fuck about with, like, dude.
But how can you physically? That's like me. I don't know. That's like me kicking your memories. Like, it just doesn't quite make sense. I also really love it.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's like she can punch moments out of existence is also in her lore slide.
Yeah.
So that's why when we set her flavor text, I'm bored with now, and her ability to literally finish the turn and just move on from this moment is very, very flavorful. As a card, this really sings, again, with the flavor. Also, very much like Quain, my only word on this card that I would have taken out for lore reasons is the word may. The player may end their turn, but my rebuttal from that on a play design aspect is that whilst this is going to be abused the hell out of by things like extra turn spells and red and whatever else on your own turn in EDH, the political sort of implications for you using this on other people's turns is really great. So, if someone's about to get, cyclonic rifted, or if someone's about to have all their creatures died to like a settle the wreckage or something, you can help them end their turn, and they don't necessarily have to. So you can say you may end your turn. So they're kind of easing back on the oppressive nature on just you being able to go, nope, that's finished now. Nope, you're done. Like a Sundial of the Infinite kind of thing. I also like her attitude. So Abeka as a character is very impulsive, which for a time mage seems kind of intuitive, because she always wants to live in the now. But she wants to live in the now so much that as soon as the now becomes anything less than absolutely heart-poundingly brilliant, she then moves literally onto the next one, because she can physically manipulate time. I don't know, it just sounds, there's nothing they try in Magic. There's a lot of soft magic systems in Magic, and then they have tried doing a lot of hard magic systems where they try and have rules and all this kind of thing. I mean, the concept of the game, surrounding mana, for example, is kind of a hard magic system, but then certain characters, they softball it. And Abeka is the biggest soft magic system I've ever seen in the game, where they literally go, she can punch time, it's fine.
It's fine. We're not going to come back to ever again.
She's an ogre wizard, it's okay. And really, I feel like what this card is, and again, this might just be kind of wish fulfillment on the side of the players, because they do design these cards years in advance, and any mistakes that they make in a recent play history, as we say, doesn't necessarily mean they get corrected with the next set. It could be corrected in about 2 years' time. But the fact that Jesper Icing has this very specific artwork where the time that she's shattering turns into shards, very much like the kind of aesthetic we've seen on recent Teferi cards. You pointed this out a couple of weeks ago, because a lot of what cards like Teferi cards and this kind of thing, they very much like play on tempo plays and things going on the stack. And then a lot of people who play like blue magic in EDH, a lot of their combos will happen on other people's turns because they can untap or do things at instant speed. So I very much feel like Abeka is literally the design team going, we know you don't like getting cyclonic rifted. We know you don't like being Teferi'd and comboed out. How about a commander that literally is all about that?
It's in response to Teferi's protection. Is just do
you know what I mean? Like, and also, or like to a response to a cyclonic rift, or someone comboing off straight away. Or even things like when people get into infinite loops that don't have an out, like the game just stalls. You could end the turn from them. Just everything about her is just absolutely 100%. Cracked nonsense, and nonsense I really mean that word. It's gobbledygook, it's garbage, but it works
Yeah.
so fucking brilliantly, and I really love her. I think she's great.
Yeah, as you say, I think this is a character that's probably just dropped to fulfill, and it's very on the nose the function it's fulfilling, and the fact that it's obviously playing towards a niche. Plus, also in and of herself, she, as much as she can stop other things being broken, she herself can be exceptionally broken. Shock horror.
Yeah.
So I think as much as she is very on the nose, like we need this effect in Magic, and I think it's really cool. I like the idea that we're playing into ogre wizards always being these chaotic kind of. They don't really know. They have no finesse. No grace to their magic. I like the idea that they are very abrupt and forceful with the way that they use magic. So very, very cool. And again, as you say, soft lore. Are we likely to get an unabridged version of her lore? Probably not, because I don't think they can do it properly. Same with, say, Prismatic Piper. Probably same with Amanatu. We'll probably not see her again because they've pushed. I guess it's the same idea with this Doctor Who thing. If when you push characters to be so OP, it's really hard to justify their foils. In the same way that if you make a massive, if you do a character like this that has exceptional ability, thankfully she's not a planeswalker, so you can't gallivant across the multiverse to cause issues. Hopefully whatever plane she's on, she can only abuse it so far. Maybe her intention is only to abuse it so far. So yeah, whatever. You can just brush past it.
I think there's one line in her lore slide which I think is very indicative of that, and then we'll move on. It says that she has no interest in good or bad, simply what is fun. So, and I think. Yeah. I kind of think that was maybe a little bit of a plea to Commander players of going, don't necessarily be an oppressive dick, just do what's fun. Oh wait, there are 3 2-mana red spells that are essentially now a Time Will Walk with her, and that's a Power 9 band card. Cool.
I feel like there's maybe I like the fact they create these characters that are kind of grayscale on the morality. People like Amanatu and Arkelos, and they're like, "Oh, the players are going to be nice with the. Oh God, what do they do to our babies? Oh no, what did you do?" Yeah, I feel like there's a certain degree of that with some of these characters where they go, "Look, we deliberately made them neutral. Don't be a dick." And then people just go, "I'll be a dick if I want to be a dick." Yeah, so I think it's an interesting, but yeah, she's very, very cool. That idea of punching through that there's no way that's not deliberately Teferi based. We could probably ask Jesper specifically. I'm pretty sure that's either his deliberate intention or Wizards asked him to.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
That's very cool. It feels very fun and tongue in cheek as well, which is good.
Absolutely. Who have you got next?
So I've got Rograk. Rograk is our first ever 0-mana commander, first ever 0-mana legendary, and so he's a 0-mana cobbled warrior. He has a little red identifier in the far left of his type line, meaning he is a red card. He is a 0-1 first strike menace. Is it haste? Oh God, Nathan, well done. Trample, sorry, first strike menace and trample. Obviously has partner. Flavor text strength is relative. We'll come back to that in a second. The reason why I like Rograk is because I've been playing a Prosh deck for years, and I really like Kobolds. I think Kobolds, they have a fractured and illustrious history. They've only had like a few different representations. They're loading legends, which is, I know last week we said that Ghost of Ramirez Pietro, or Di Pietro, only has, is like already real reference to legends. That's a lie. Rograk kind of references it as well, specifically because he's the son of Rogar. Rogar was in Legends. He is a 5/5 for 2 black, red. At the beginning of your upkeep, unless you pay red, an opponent gains control of Rogar of Kirkheap and all creatures you control named Kobolds of Kirkheap. If a player gains control of a creature this way, tap it. Creatures you control named Kobolds of Kirkheap get +2/+2. Basically, he's a Kobold's lord, and if you don't pay a strict upkeep costs, your opponent gains control of all your creatures. Because back in the day, Magic was really fun like that. The interesting thing about this is that it's a really interesting throwback to have him being Rograk, son of Rogar, and then say strength is relative to make players go and look, well, who's Rogar then? And the reason I like this is because you don't get a lot of lineage in Magic anymore. Like, one of the biggest things I liked about Dominaria is that you had Wrath, Capuchin, you had Danitha, as well, and then you had Shana, Sisay's Legacy. You had characters that were generations behind the characters we had in our youth. I say in our youth, I mean like for those Magic players that have been playing for, a good 15, 20 years. Like these are characters obviously we've known and were printed in their own time. And if we see printings of them now, it's obviously a showing of them back in the day. Like, one of the reasons Teferi coming back was really interesting is because a character that I can relate to in a negative fashion as much as other people can relate to in a negative fashion from back in the day. Like, it kind of bridges the gap between new lore and old lore. And again, with the Ghost of Ramirez, it was interesting that they only had a couple of throwbacks to legends. This being one of them, I think is really interesting. And the lore of Rograk's is really cool because the idea is Rogar, his father, tried to, in the same way that the kobolds obviously of Kirkheap specifically idolize and think of Prosh as their god. So they do everything to appease him. They create sacrifices. They do everything in his name. Rogar, to kind of bounce off of this, tried to get a similar fealty pay to him. And so he had as much sacrifice being paid to him, as much devotion being paid to him, as much as it was to Prosh. Rograk doesn't like this. Rograk thinks this is a bad idea. Rograk wants to basically create civil unrest and create a resistance to fight against him. The interesting thing about that is that his resistance against his father's tyrannical rule is significantly weaker, because obviously Rograk's a 5/5. So Rogar's a 5/5, Rograk's a 0/1. Rogar's got all of these kobolds that he makes bigger. Rograk in his artwork, he's appealing to a bunch of skulls on spikes, which I've only realised today is a nod that his army is just a bunch of dead people. So he doesn't even have an army. Bless him, he's a 0/1 with all of. I love his conviction gives him the first jump. His conviction gives him menace. His conviction gives him trample. Does he have any power? No, not at all. And it's amazing, because what I also like is it kind of plays back to this idea with Goblin King of Goblin King is like one of the original Goblin Lord, the one that gave other goblins +1/+1, all goblins. That wasn't just yours, your opponents as well, because back in the day magic was fun. And in the flavor text for that, to be king, Numsgil did in Blog, who did in Unkfell, who did in Viddle, who did in Lol, who did in Alrock, ... I like this idea of succession in goblin races, and kobolds to a degree are a facsimile for goblins. I mean, we've already had arguments about what the difference between a kobold and a goblin is, but I like this idea of succession, this idea the only way Rogar will be unseated is if someone beats him and takes his place. I would love, in a few years' time, if they pay this homage and we get a Rograk king of the kobolds, and we've seen him overturn his father's tyrannical rule. The other thing that's really interesting is looking throughout all of the kobold artworks, which I did today, obviously. They're red, blue, green, purple, brown. Like, Rograk's red and his dad's green. The kobolds in Kobolds of Kirkheap token are blue. Why they made them blue? This is one of the most confusing lore things. If we don't eventually do it, I might have to petition to 8 Spice Rack to get him to do it, because he loves goblins and kobolds. I feel like sit on the coattails of goblins, and we need some justification for why they're every colour of the fucking rainbow. Okay, they're not Skittles, they're kobolds. Okay. Anyway, love Rograk. I love kobolds, and it's likely to be a deck that I play in the future, because he's surprisingly really super powerful. If you watch the recent game nights, the fact that you get to play out your commander before playing a land, super cool, super flavorful. We love it.
Yeah, I agree. I think Rograk, Son of Rogar, is a very cool throwback and a very cool new commander. All right, moving on. I have next up Keskit, the Flesh Sculptor. So Keskit is 2 generic and a black for a legendary creature, human artificer, although you wouldn't know it to look at them, a 1/3. Tap, sacrifice 3 other artifacts and or creatures. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard, and it has partner. The flavor text reads, perfection is elusive. Let us try again. Keskit is also referenced on the card in this set, Profane Transfusion. So this is one of those cards that I had to look up to see if it had any other printings. It's not, it is only in this set. Profane Transfusion is a sorcery, and the flavor text from that sorcery reads, those that fall short of perfection can still contribute to the great work. Keskit, the Flesh Sculptor. So Keskit is a character that we have from the Days of the Praetors on New Phyrexia, and he is an acolyte of Shieldred, who is the Black Praetor, who is the kind of big spider goddess, I suppose. He is absolutely obsessed with his Praetor as well, so he himself has, as part of his compilation, Phyrexianization, if you like, he's given himself spider legs, metal spider legs, and basically a completely robotic body in that kind of vein, with only a part of his face being the only kind of human thing left of him. And he's got this big kind of fur shawl over the top of his back. Essentially, Keskit is the archetypal mad evil scientist. And that's kind of why I like him. There's been a lot of subversion in Magic, and rightly so, with a lot of these characters and a lot of these kind of tropes of fantasy, where we don't really get the super classic ones as much anymore, because they've kind of been done to death. I think the last time we got like proper mad scientist territory was with Ludovic, and maybe Geralf as well from Innistrad, but they were much more in like kind of a
fashion.
Yeah, and they dealt with zombies, and they were surgeons and doctors, that kind of thing. Whereas this guy fills a very similar role, but just to look at him, he is like a sci-fi villain, right? Keskit, the flesh sculptor, and Keskit's role is that when Shieldred gains quote unquote new followers, Keskit is the one that completes them and turns them into other acolytes of Shieldred. And I like this idea that Keskit is always trying to do better, because as much as the Phyrexians are evil, they're nothing if not convicted to their own beliefs, right? I think that's almost everything about Phyrexian law, especially with the five creators, is the idea that they all think their way is best into
Yeah,
Phyrexia.
bless them. They're just trying their hardest.
They're just trying their
They're just
hardest.
doing what they can. Yeah.
Elish Norn, during that story arc, is the one that won out, the white one, and has since destroyed the other realms of the creators, except for except for the red one? He's still got his one kicking around.
Well, we haven't got a confirmation. All we know is that she definitely Sheldred was left fleeing. I know that she took over the Voraclex side. I think Urabrask, because he was separated off anyway, he was already on the side of the Mirrans. If the Mirrans lost, I feel like Urabrask's kingdom probably fell, and I don't know about Jin.
Cool.
If anything, Keskit looks very Ginny to me, so I feel like she's probably taken over that as well.
Sure, exactly. So yeah, that's it. And Sheldred was the other sort of main contender against Sheldred, against Elish Norn. Sheldred was probably going to be like the sort of next runner-up if Elish Norn didn't quite make it. So Keskit is that, and there's not much more to Keskit than that. He's a front-running Sheldred acolyte. He looks the part. He does the business. That's him. And the ability is very flavorful as well, sacrificing 3 artifacts and or creatures. So it could be that he's, throwing away old attempts at compilation. It could be that he's killing off test subjects to try and attain the perfect Phyrexian acolyte, to basically get more information from your library and to fill up your graveyard as well, which is what you would be doing if you were killing test subjects left, right, and centre. The reason I do like him, though, is because not only just because of what they are as a character and the lore-wise, it's the fact that we get to see more named characters from that period of Magic. Because from the Phyrexian side of things, they really, as part of the storyline, focused on Kharn, as you would, and they focused on the 5 main praetors. But they didn't do much else other than that. You had some characters like Glyssa the Traitor and who's the Getz, Lord of the Vault? Yeah. So you did have a few of them, but these were very big, heavy hitters, and I quite like seeing the sort of second tier characters going on. Like, for example, another good one that's very much in the same vein as Keskit is the character of Whisper from the Dominaria set that came out, the most recent Dominaria set, who was kind of Bells and Locke's second tier lieutenant. And just having these characters that potentially in further stories we can have, our protagonists encounter and deal with without it necessarily always being like a boss fight, just seems a lot more fleshed out. And I think this is an uncommon commander. It's a partner commander. This is exactly kind of the right level of character that they need to be doing for these uncommon partners. And yeah, I just think his whole deal is very classic sci-fi fantasy bad guy. And yeah, I really like it. I really like a kind of return to sort of trope, if you like.
I think mechanically as well, the idea that sacrificing 3 other artifacts or creatures, they don't care if it's flesh or metal. The idea that 2 of these things you put into your hand, that's the advancement, and the rest goes to your graveyard, like discarding the bits that you don't need. Yeah, very cool. Very cool, very evocative. Plus, who doesn't like Phyrexia? I think we both like sci-fi. I think it's cool. So we've done a lot of high fantasy recently. If you look at all of the different sets across the last, say, five years, we've done things like Eldraine, Dominaria. We've gone back to typical fantasy tropes. I know that maybe they don't want to do sci-fi as much. I don't know what their reasoning for that is. Maybe other companies and other products do it better, quote unquote better, but I feel like maybe that's why they're putting off new Phyrexia. All I know is that I really liked that fusion from old school Magic, early days Magic, of where they had this mix of, say, and we've already spoken about this a few episodes, about this Thran technology idea really intrigues me. I like this idea of ancient technology and current fantasy, kind of this mix of magic and artifice. I think it's really interesting. So yeah, the more the better.
For sure.
So I've got a random deep cut as my next one. Let's talk about Gorm Uldrak. Now, Gore Moldrak's really interesting. First time character, right? First time we've seen this guy, this random ophthalmologist. No, fam. We've already seen him twice. The reason why you might not know his name is because we've only seen him, and this wasn't me that found this out. This is someone else who was very astute. Do Reddit, by the way, during spoiler season. You'll learn infinitely about the world of magic. We've had his name come up twice, once in M12 and once in M15. He is on both flavor texts for Amphin Cutthroat and Amphin Pathmage. Now, the Amphins are humanoid salamanders from Chandalar. Now, Chandalar kind of unofficially was the core set. I'm doing air quotes again. It's been a while. Like the core set plane. Because it was kind of like typical fantasy. It didn't do anything completely necessarily too overt or extreme. Nothing about it specifically thematic beyond just being a typical fantasy plane. This is, for example, where the Chain Veil came from and the Anarchia from. The reason I like this card a lot is because Amphin Cutthroat and Amphin Pathmage have like decent flavor text. I'm not going to read out the entire thing, but the idea being that this guy, Gore Moldrak, has been paying attention to the Amphin, and the Amphin are kind of like mind mages. They can work in a way of where they can, it's like mnemonic, mnemology, MENMMIC, like that idea of working with memory and the way your brain thinks. And what they've done is they've managed to convince everyone of Chandalar they don't exist, while slowly but surely building up their forces. And one of the coolest things about Gore is that his flavor text, his lore slide wasn't a description about who he is as a person in any way, shape, or form. It's just another flavor text. Both of his flavor texts from the other two cards are part of his crypto histories, and his lore slide is another crypto history. It basically talks about how the Amphins are very slowly but surely overtaking Chandalar, and they're basically going to wage a war against them. And Gore Moldrak, 1 blue-green for a 3/2 human scout, which is very... I like the idea of scouts being the people that go out and research different species. And he's essentially a species specialist, which is very cool. I like this idea a lot. And he's a 3/2. You and permanents you control have protection from salamanders. At the beginning of your end step, each player who controls the fewest creatures creates a 4/3 blue salamander warrior creature token. Now, this is really, really cool. The idea of the play pattern around this is that everyone who has like the least amount of creatures to pay attention to it, slowly but surely have salamanders kind of build up on their play side, until the whole field is just salamanders. And Gore Moldrak and you're fine because you're on Gore Moldrak. He's the only one who's been paying attention to all the shit that's been going on for all these years. He's the only one who paid attention and documented it. And so you're fine. You've got protection against the salamanders. But damn straight if the salamanders won't eventually kill someone. This story idea is fantastic. The fact they gave him no objective story arc beyond yet another entry into his crypto histories is fantastic. Again, like the fact that it's a character that technically does exist in the lore, like with Jury, where we looked at a character that had only been listed in flavor text. This is just obscure enough that I don't count it as a character that's kind of already existed, because no one really paid attention to the random flavor text from M12 and M15. No one expected this, and yet it tells a massively evocative story. Plus, we're not likely to go to Chandalar. We haven't done core sets in a while, like consistently. The generic fantasy feel doesn't necessarily play very well when you've got all of these different themes and specificities in Magic now, all of these different planes that do general fantasy better because it flexes in this direction or that direction. So the fact that we get almost like a history of how Chandalar falls to the Amphin, because in a few years we go there and suddenly I was like, what the fuck, what's going on with all these Amphin? You're like, well, buddy, did you pay attention to Gore Moldrak? Because I did. Maybe you should have. So yeah, for that and that alone, I think it's amazing. This idea of this not necessarily a heretic, but this like madman who's paying attention to things that no one else is, and eventually we see the story we see the cards demonstrate and present the story that's actually happening quite nicely. Yeah, you have to read into it a little bit, but once you do, it's very clever.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I would sort of agree that this is a character that, although it doesn't necessarily fall into our remit of brand new characters without any establishment, the establishment is just obscure enough and intentionally obscure enough that this is now a completely new fleshed out character that kind of fits in with the backstory, as opposed to Jury, where I think Jury of the Review only appeared on some flavor text, as well as Helena and Elena, but their whole deal was very realized before they got the card. So yeah, I think you're bang on there.
Protection from salamanders. What a silly line of text.
Yeah, very, very cool. My next one is Rayav, Master Smith. This is a legendary creature, dwarf artificer, 2/2 for a red and a white. This is an uncommon that doesn't have partner, which is kind of strange. I wonder why they gave certain things partner and other things not. Not for this time, not for this conversation. Rayav reads, whenever a creature you control that's enchanted or equipped attacks, that creature gains double strike until end of turn. The flavor text reads, there's always room for improvement, and the art is by Scott Murphy. And yep, in the artwork we see Rayav adorned with a bunch of trinkets and glowy ether tools. Notably, he is wearing a vambrace, which has a bunch of tools on it and a big glowy pointy thing. Obviously, we don't know what it is. So this guy is very clearly an artificer. In the lore, Rayav is from the plane of Kaladesh, which is pretty much where the only place we get dwarves from nowadays. There were a couple of dwarves in the latest core set that I think were maybe meant to be from Lorwyn. Not from Lorwyn, sorry, from Eldraine, although it wasn't specifically stated, and we only got a couple of dwarf cards in Eldraine. But for the most part, from like the recent sort of
what do you mean? We got 7 of them. What do you mean?
That was one card. Don't fucking test me on 7 dwarves. From the past 5 years of Magic. From the past 5 years of Magic, or so, it could even be longer. Kaladesh has been like kind of the big dwarf plane. His whole deal is that he is, as many people are on Kaladesh, an inventor and a smith and an artificer. But his big claim to fame is that he's made a gauntlet that has a bunch of automated, very fine, precise tools attached for it that you would wear to continue doing your work. And he is so confident that he is the only smith on Kaladesh that can actually create such an item, that he has made the designs for his product public as part of a publicity stunt. So that means that anyone can look at his designs and try and recreate this item. But he's the only smith that can actually do it and actually make such a precise tool. And the law states that he is correct in this assumption and that he gets a lot of business and a lot of work because people want variations on this tool. That's a fairly simple lore and backstory, especially for a character from Kaladesh, because almost every main character from Kaladesh that wasn't necessarily a revolutionary was some sort of inventor, and maybe both at the same time. I have one gripe about this card before I talk about why I think it's really good, and I'll get it out of the way first because it's really petty and I'm really disgusted with myself. I'm going to say it anyway. The law states that he's made a gauntlet. In the artwork, it's not a fucking gauntlet. It's a vambrace. I know that's petty, but it's definitely not a gauntlet. We all know what a gauntlet is. If Marvel has taught us anything, we know what a fucking gauntlet looks like, okay? If you're wearing a wrist thing, I don't know, man. It just seems there's no, like, book to fuck up on. Come on, Wizards. Give your artists the right information, man. Yeah, whatever. It's fine. I'll get over it. The thing that I like about Rayav, why I think it's really important, why he's in my top 6, is because we need more dwarves in Magic the Gathering, dude. We need more of them. They're a huge fantasy trope. They're massive. They are as big as elves and humans and dragons. They're in every fantasy IP. And maybe there's like some design like note on a whiteboard somewhere in like Wizards HQ where the design team, every time they go to do like a new race of characters like in a plane, there's a big note that says, we don't do fucking dwarves in WotC, or there's like some kind of too cool for school thing or whatever. But we need more of them because I think they are distinct. You know, as much as races like the core from Zendikar, we kind of griped a few episodes ago that, you know, it was only in the third Zendikar set that they actually started to feel a bit more unique, and they weren't just like an amalgamation of elves. They weren't just like cliff elves or cliff humans. You know, they actually felt like their own thing. I think dwarves do feel like their own thing across different planes. And I think what their thing is that they are the kind of other flip side to the coin to Vidalcans. So Vidalcans are obviously also on Kaladesh as well as being on other planes. But if we're looking at artifact synergistic races across the board, Vidalcans tend to fit that in blue a lot of the time. And a lot of their thing is about drawing cards and is about sort of, you know, knowledge gained through artifice, you know, and creating great works to expand your knowledge of the universe. Whereas the Kaladesh dwarves, especially, they are also very heavily artifact synergistic, but their whole thing is about making things more precise and more efficient. And in the kind of traditional red-white way, that does involve combat. So the fact that Rayav gives things double strike until end of turn if they're equipped or enchanted usually gets stapled onto these things as well, means that his items are so good that whatever item he gives you, it will do its thing, but it will also do it literally twice as good as anyone else does it. So if he gives you a hammer, it will hit for twice as much. You know, if he gives you like a pair of, you know, boots, you're going to be able to run twice as fast and hit twice as hard with those boots on. So I really like that, and I really like the identity that they're starting to give dwarves, because they need something. They can't just be like just another humanoid race, because that would be such a waste. So all of these things, I think this is a very good direction. And I don't think about dwarves that often. Like, this isn't something, not like my werewolf thing. Like, I'm not flying my flag for the dwarves of magic. But every time I see a new dwarf commander, I always think that there's such a cool design space. Do you remember the like dwarves from Kaladesh? You had Depala, Pilot Exemplar, or whatever her name was, the one which, gave all dwarves and vehicles +1/+1 and did all kind of vehicle-y stuff. Like, they have really cool identities. And I think, they just need to keep pushing the envelope with them, because we need artifact synergies that aren't blue in Magic. It's just, as simple as that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Not to sell them too short. The problem is that they have vehicle synergy almost specifically because of Kaladesh, in the same way that cores have artifacts equipment synergy specifically because of Zendikar.
This is true.
These are problems because they shoehorn, as you say, an entire race towards a specific subtype. At that point, their mechanical diversity really suffers. And the fact that they've pulled back on them a lot. Like, I was thinking as you were saying this, I was like, well, it's weird that Kithkin got done instead of dwarves, because Kithkin obviously played towards his hobbit trope, and yet the difference between hobbits and humans was quite distinct in Lord of the Rings, because they had almost like sleuthy roguishness to them, whereas the Kithkin of Lorwyn were specifically just +1/+1 counters, first strike, all the normal typical white weenie stuff. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they go moving forwards. Now they're playing with all these different races, especially seeing as we're coming up towards a Dungeons and Dragons set. Maybe we'll get something that is a little bit more towards auramancy specifically for dwarves as well. I know you said that obviously we dropped together equipped and enchanted, because typically it allows you to play for both auras and equipment, which is good. But yeah, it's interesting you say it feels like the set they were in kind of defined them very specifically. Depala specifically only allowing you to get dwarves or vehicles, and if you don't want to play that specific archetype, you're not playing dwarves. In the same way, if you don't want to play with equipment with Rayev, you're not playing him.
But I think that's fine though. Having a setting which gives your race their niche, I think, is okay, because that's how we get anything and everything. But there we go. We don't always have to agree with everything. What's your next one?
My next one's Prava. Who I was originally going to do Nemrith, the fairy legend, but she was really boring. She had nothing interesting to talk about. Prava, on the other hand, does. Prava has some very interesting things going on for her. Not only within her Lord side does she talk about Lucia, who was the vampire from the same set as Markov. So she was one of the sub commanders that you could have used from there, and we didn't really get much about her. We didn't really know anything about where she was from, beyond the fact that she looks very Roman in her appearance, in her attire. Like, she's got like a Roman helm on. It looks like in the background people thought maybe Fiora, because the architecture looked very Fioran, but I think over the years we've talked, there's been discussion about maybe that she was that she has interaction with Saskia. Saskia being more Gallic from the Gauls, and we've talked about this before on this podcast already. The idea being that Prava specifically specified Steel of the Legion, and she specifically specified to have multiple battles with Lucia, with a very, very different military outlook on the way that she does things. Like, Lucia is exceptionally merciless. She's willing to sacrifice her own troops to further her goals, whereas Prava has been known to be have the lowest mortality rate in terms of like wars, in terms of like amount of her troops that she's lost. So she's a 1/4. She gives other token creatures on your turn +1/+4 until the end of turn. And then you can pay 3 and a white to make a 1/1 creature token. She has partner. So obviously you can partner up with any other number of partner providers as you want to. And she's a cat soldier. The reason I like this is because it's expanding lore on other characters that we didn't necessarily have expansion on. Like, Lucia was kind of left nebulously, there was an unknown plane without any real definition on her whatsoever. So we still don't know what plane we're looking at. But what I like is it's almost like a counter to Theros being that Greco style of talking about like the history and the lore, looking at hydras, krakens, that kind of thing. Even if it is a bit of a bastardization on the purity of its story, it does look like, like the Iliad and the Odyssey as inspiration for these great trials like heroes and monsters. Whereas whatever plane Prava and Lucia, and we'll assume Saskia are from, is more feudal. It's more army versus army, and it's something we didn't necessarily get we looked at, say, Khans. Like Khans was originally inspired by Monseng, the plane chase plane, where it had giant armies kind of coming at each other across foothills. We haven't really got like an army feudal plane in a long time. Like even though War of the Spark was this great climactic battle, it was loads of planeswalkers against a zombie army. It wasn't people versus people. It wasn't like having to deal with your losses. It's almost like the plane that Ob Nixilis originally came from was one of these planes where everyone was fighting all the time until Ob Nixilis eventually killed everything to win the war, to win the greatest war, which was, like, and then he was so bored he had to move on to another plane. This idea of having a feudal plane, I think, is really, really interesting. I like the idea that she puts herself ahead of her and represents her army, like kind of morality wise. The way she is a 1/4, and then she gives the rest of her troops +1/+4. Like, so it's like this idea of having, typically in a war, you'll have disposable troops. You're realistically going to have people that die within your army. And the fact that she has, she creates 1/1 white soldier tokens, completely nondescript tokens, don't have names or anything. In fact, she can create a disposable army, but in fact, she protects it almost with herself, being a 1/4 and giving +1/+4, specifically to creature tokens, to underrepresented characters that don't have their own name, their own background, I think is very interesting.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I like Prava a lot. There are a lot of sort of cat soldiers across Magic. Leonin tend to be one of these anthropomorphized groups that do get a lot of showing. But it's always kind of nice when you see legendary creatures of it, because people love Leonin. It's always nice to get more Leonin.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So my last one then is Livio, Oathsworn Sentinel. Livio, Oathsworn Sentinel is a 1 and a white legendary creature, human knight for 2/2. So far, so very predictable. His abilities, however, are 1 and a white. Choose another target creature. Its controller may exile it with an Aegis counter on it. And then the second ability is 2 and a white, tap. Return all exiled cards with Aegis counters on them to the battlefield under their owner's control. And Livio has Partner. He's one of the rare partners that you can get. Art is by Kikai Kataki and shows Livio in the throes of battle with a big, I suppose, two-ended spear. I know there's lots of different definitions of what weapons are. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. In full armor with a big flowing red cape. This guy looks pretty badass. A little bit boring with the kind of creature types and whatever else. Like, it looks quite boring on the surface. And this is one of those characters where, when I was researching for this episode, I was going through all the lore slides. This one actually picked me up on the lore rather than what the card did. And then as soon as I looked a little bit harder at what the card did, I suddenly started to get a little bit more interested. So Livio is from the plane of Fiora, which is the Roman-inspired, or Italy-inspired, I should say, plane from the conspiracy sets. So it's kind of Renaissance Italy. Think sort of like Game of Thrones if it had more pizza. I think then Fiora is kind of like where you need to be. So Livio is from a noble house on Fiora. We don't know which one, but he renounced his heraldry and his name when he saw his father, who was the head of this house, killing a village of commoners to basically ruin the land to spite another nobleman that he was having a feud with. He got very disillusioned with the whole thing and swore his life to protecting the common folk of Fiora and Paliano, which is the big high city on this plane. So he is essentially, I like to think of him, he's kind of like Batman, right? He's like from a noble background. He has lots of cash, and he puts all of that towards fighting crime, essentially, and corruption. So that's pretty cool. And his card really reflects that. I like the idea that he can exile other things, and it's not necessarily your stuff. It could be anyone else's. And then he is responsible for bringing it back. I don't quite know why the word Aegis is used for that counter. Do you? Is it some kind of literary thing that I'm not picking up on?
Yeah, it's. I guess it's the idea is to have Aegis is the protection or backing or support of a particular person or organisation.
Oh, there we go.
Protected. So yeah, specific. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. And but what I do like about this card isn't just that he's just, a typical white knight. He saves other things from being harmed or whatever. The fact that his second ability is dependent on him bringing them back is another quite political aspect that I think may belie a part of Livio's character that his lore slide doesn't belie to. So in the lore slide, it kind of seems that he's very self-righteous, he's very on the side of good and for the common people. But his card also indicates that he can be still quite political and that he's still not quite free of the political games that the elite of Paliano kind of play. In the lore slide, it also suggests that Queen Marchesa has kind of noticed Livio and like he's on her radar, which could, if we ever go back to a conspiracy set, could be a further storyline that we kind of explore, where the past few sort of conspiracy sets have been about Marchesa's rise to power. The third one could be about how she starts to get over a throne and like a revolution kind of starts to happen, which I think is kind of cool. Livio's also referenced in another card in this set, like a little bit like Keskit, on Staunch Throne Guard. And the flavor text on Staunch Throne Guard, which is the only flavor text we have for him, is Brago, in his arrogance, let the throne's defenses fall dormant. Our new queen is not so incautious, Livio, Oathsworn Sentinel. So it's this idea that he is definitely against the aristocracy in as much as he believes that they are oppressors as opposed to saviors of the city, which is, I think, is not a new idea, especially on that plane. But it's nice to see other characters kind of fall into this kind of thing. Because there are a lot of legendary creatures that we've had from the conspiracy sets, which do sort of fall into this idea of being like people protectors. But I kind of feel like the exiling stuff and then bringing them back, not as an automatic triggered ability or triggered ability, is an activated ability that you have to pay into. And then what happens if Livio is killed? If he exiles something with an ace counter on it, he gets killed, goes back to the command zone. You don't recast him all game. That person's thing is just then lost, so you can't bring them back. I think it's just, it's a lot more. We've seen this kind of white knight trope a lot in Magic. It's one of the big sort of staples of that color and of knights as a tribe. But this is the first time I've really looked at a knight card and thought that it's actually got a little bit more swivel to its lore and nuance, both as a play piece and as its kind of backstory. And I didn't think that when I first saw the card. So it was a bit of a surprise for me. Well, I mean, have you had any thoughts on Livio? Did you kind of pick him out when you first saw him?
He's one of the few ones I'm surprised does have partner.
Oh, really?
I feel like he's a self-contained story. I feel like some of them clearly fulfill a role, like, say, Prava specifically creates tokens, and Rogra specifically is a great Voltron commander, or a great place to, say, put a lot of equipment on, all that. Like, I think it speaks to having someone else that fulfills the other side that you don't have. Whereas with Livio, I feel like it's almost like self-contained flavor, like it doesn't need the partner. Whereas I think other characters that didn't, say, like Belby, for example, or Jury, maybe should have had partner because they're quite narrow in what they do, but probably maybe bounce off something else a bit better. And I think that's obviously a conversation for another day. Beyond the fact that I don't think he needed a partner, I do like that self-contained, willing to sacrifice himself for others. I just like the idea also in the meta narrative of where he does the great thing of laying down his life to save everyone, and then you just recast him. He's like, "Hey guys," and I was like, "What? But I thought you were sacrificing us." I did actually die. I just, don't worry, I can come back whenever I want. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Beyond that aspect, I think it's a very nice contained little story. I like this idea of, I do like the idea of him being Batman. What I like is the fact that he's kind of playing more with a Robin kind of weapon with the staff rather than being a Batman. But
he's got more of like a Damian Wayne staff, like a bow staff.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Beyond that, very, very cool. And also, the more we get of Fiora, the better. Like, again, if Prava is from any of the characters that play from another set, from another character's setting, even if we don't know what that setting is, all it's doing is expanding lore in future.
Fiora is one of those planes where I feel like it should be more popular than it is. And I don't necessarily think it's just to do with the fact that it was a conspiracy set, so at the time it wasn't like a mainline set, because in Commander products there's lots of like things like the Monarch mechanic, which is a big part of this Commander Legends build. Like, they brought it back as a keyword for this set, was introduced in conspiracy, so Commander players especially are very aware of this plane. I just think maybe we need like a refresher. Maybe it is because they were ancillary sets, people didn't really know about it, but then everyone knows about Battle Bond. And everyone knows about the arenas and the kind of esports aesthetic of Battle Bond. So I don't know.
Maybe just before the whole, like, 'cause there was a big wave, I think, of popularity for Magic. I think Conspiracy kind of just sat just before that. And again, being ancillary does kind of play against it for the average person. Like, if it was, say, an arena version, if it was something you could play on Arena, I think it'd be hugely more popular. But the fact it doesn't necessarily have that platform probably does it an injustice.
Cool. So, who is your last pick of the episode?
My last pick is Zara, Renegade Recruiter.
Ooh.
Not only am I a big sucker for alliteration and assonance, so Renegade Recruiter doing a very good job there. What I like about this set more than anything, so Zara is a 3 blue-red legendary human pirate, 4/3 with flying. When she attacks, look at the defending player's hand. You may put a creature card from it onto the battlefield under your control, taps it attacking that player or planeswalker they control. Return that creature to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Shockingly, Nathan likes thefty cards. But the reason I like this is because it's an interesting dynamic having both Kaladeshi and Ixalani pirates in the same set. I think it's good because it highlights the differences between them really well. The reason the reason why pirates are kind of interesting to me is they're a massive popular tribe that only had like a few was it the Talas? The Talas back in the day? I used to play with with cards back from like Odyssey, and there was a few like piratey themed cards, but beyond that we didn't really get any. And then we had like a huge influx, a quite I'd say, for lack of a better word, shallow influx between Ixalan and Kaladesh because they didn't necessarily push the envelope on super powerful generals. So even Beckett Brass, you got to jump through some loopholes to get the full effect out of her. But I like the fact they were able to put both of them into the set because it kind of shows that recently they've created a tribe that does have mechanical diversity as well as aesthetic diversity.
We also did get a lot of pirates from unknown planes as well, because there are cards like Dockside Extortionist, Glinthorn Buccaneer from like recent Commander sets and mainline sets, which are goblins and minotaurs, which were on Ixalan, but they're not the same kind of goblins and minotaurs, confusingly. And I think a few of the pirate cards in this set as well are kind of low-key actually not from either Ixalan or Kaladesh, even though those are definitely the two main places that people are pulling from.
Yeah, I think it's like almost opposite to like the way they did with dinosaurs. They just went back and errated a load of cards to also be dinosaurs to kind of extend their lore and create like a broader card pool for them to play with. I feel like with pirates, they already kind of did exist, and they kind of had to kind of reinforce like, no, this is an existing archetype across however many. Like pirates, again, it's a job title. It's not like you can't be a pirate on as long as a plane has something to steal, there can be pirates, right?
Yeah.
So the thing I like about her though is that she is a renegade recruiter. Basically, the idea is that she was she had a silver tongue. It was told that she could basically recruit anyone to her side against the consulate throughout the story of Aether Revolt. Part of the reason why this really appeals to me, and it's something I only realised today, I was thinking about like where in popular culture why I like the idea of sky pirates so much, and I was thinking first maybe Mortal Engines, maybe a little bit of his Dark Materials. No. It was from the Edgeworld series by Paul Stewart and Chris Riddle. If you've got kids out there, anyone who's listening who's got young kids, go and get them the Edgeworld series because it is one of the best series of books that I forgot that I read as a kid, and it plays a lot into this idea of sky piracy using technology like rocks that float naturally by their biology, by their physiology. I like the idea that the same kind of thing in Kaladesh, where they use the aether, and the aether kind of there's an aether sphere around the plane. It's almost like our ozone layer, and it's obviously like pure mana, and it's what they get a lot of their mana from. Because there's no true mages in Kaladesh. They're all artificers who know how to craft it in specific ways using machines and stuff like that. The reason I get to this is the crux of it is I'd love to see a sky plane or a story that was like sky based. I know we recently had a little bit of it in Zendikar with the Sky Claves. I know we got like a little bit of in Ikoria in the Sundered Bond of where they go to the what's the city called? Skysail?
Yeah.
Is it Skysail? Yeah, Skysail. And they're up there, and then was like, it's like a merchant hodgepodge of all these airships like wrapped together. I'd love to see a sky plane if we could do it like an air setting of something where they like going off like taking down the aether whales and that kind of thing. Like we didn't necessarily get a lot of it. A lot of the story was based down on the ground. So for me, this is a really good attribution to like things that I really like in general fantasy. I like the idea of sky ships and things like that. We don't necessarily get a lot of it. I do like the fact that she plays very well with this idea of bounce effects and flicker effects to be able to keep the creatures mechanically. The only thing that's interesting is that there were no red or blue revolt cards in Kaladesh. So if you were going to look at her being a Kaladeshi pirate and try and find some revolt cards, because obviously the creature leaves the battlefield from your side, which triggers revolt, there are no cards in her colours that you can actually play from the set, which is an interesting note. It's only something I found out today when I was looking at things. But it is interesting to see that sometimes they don't necessarily play a card to play specifically within their set's mechanics, even if it does play a lot with the bouncy shenanigans that the pirates of Ixalan had. And the fact that the two can work so well together, and I didn't necessarily choose Mr. Wrath because he was a little less exciting, Vargas Wrath, Wrath being the other Is It Legend from the set. I think Zara's a bit more interesting. And I do like the fact they put them both in the set, because then you have a moment of going, oh wait, which plane's it from? And you look and you go, oh right, yeah, the filigree across the arm guard. Right, yeah, fair enough, probably not a sea pirate. Kind of hard to tell, so you got, yeah, okay, cool. Again, that idea of being able to fuse both together and it feel cohesive, I think is very clever, and they did a good job with it.
Yeah, I think pirates in general have quite a consistent feeling across all the planes, because no matter what you're stealing, as you say, like, you've got the same sort of temperaments. Yeah, I think it's kind of cool. I do wish they would stop printing creatures that are so similar to the Ixalani pirates. Like, again, go back to like Dockside Extortionist. He looks like a pirate that you would find on Ixalan, but he's definitely not the same kind of goblin, because it does kind of throw things off a bit. I think they should probably be a little bit more bold with how they do things. But, hey ho, it's an infinite multiverse. I suppose they can do what they want.
Yeah, how do you not do pirates without the trope of tri-thorned hat or the hook or the peg leg? Like, obviously, our representation of pirates is very fantasized, and specifically, Pirates of the Caribbean have done a great job of everyone having an idea in their head of what a pirate looks like. So it is interesting to think that maybe Magic might suffer for that a little bit, that it can't break that aesthetic, which might be, demonstrative of why Ixalani pirates and Kaladeshi pirates and then random other plane pirates all kind of look the same. Because, for us, we just have a very clear representation of what we think a pirate is, and if they move away from that too much, then maybe we won't associate the two together. I don't know. Maybe that's a conversation they have.
Maybe. I mean, but then again, it does sort of tie the aesthetic together, I suppose. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. But cool.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. Well, that is our top 6 each slots for our favorite brand new commanders for Commander Legends. And yeah, as I said, sort of in the middle of the episode, I kind of feel like it would have been impossible for them to do a full-on narrative, like either a book, or maybe it would have been even difficult for them to do lots of web fiction with 70 odd new legendaries. Maybe they would have had to have been forced to do only like a select few, like very much like we've done with these review episodes. But I kind of feel like, as far as lore slides go, and I don't want this to become just the norm, although I feel it already has been, I feel like the lore slides for these legendaries were a lot more thought out and a lot more fun than lore slides of, say, like the Theros era, where they didn't even spell half the character names right, let alone, make a slight mistake of Gauntlet versus Vambrace. I think they're finally starting to find their feet with what lore we have, and the fact that web fiction came back for Zendikar, the fact that the lore slides are getting better, despite the fact that they're still not really enough. I think this is maybe a good sign that ancillary sets and mainline sets will start to get more interesting, more fun, and just more lore in general from what we've had recently, which is, is always a good thing.
Yeah, it's a strange dichotomy. You think about like the web fiction episode of the Gitrog monster. The entire narrative of that story was didn't really focus on the Gitrog monster whatsoever. So if you've got, like, say, a lore slide, they did it, proactively, and they went back and they did a lore slide for him. We'd probably learn more about the Gitrog monster from that lore slide, but there was way more nuance to a story that didn't basically focus on him at all. And then obviously there is some, where they want to push that. Do they want a story that's kind of nebulously about that character that doesn't give you any facts about it, but kind of presents the fear of the monster better? Or do you want a lore slide that tells you it's really, really scary, instead of, it's show versus tell, really, isn't it, at that point? And that must be difficult for them. And obviously, as us being fussy Vorthosians, we're never going to be fucking happy.
No, we won't.
So keep trying, bitches.
Yeah, good luck. Other than that, guys, if you have any new legendaries or any older legends that you want to talk about, or if you have anything around Commander Legends that you want to shout at us about, or if you just want to say hey, or if you just want to tell us that we've got a shit show and you don't listen to it even though you've already got an opinion on it, you can find us on Twitter at mtflavouring. Our Twitters are at Andy Manface. Nathan's, yours is?
At the Fox in the Moon.
mtflavouring@gmail.com is where you can send those sweet, sweet emails. Yeah, guys, other than that, I have really nothing much more to say about Commander Legends. I'm just desperate to get my hands on it and actually play. Hopefully tomorrow is when our product will come. Do you have any final words on Commander Legends before we leave it alone forever and never mention it again?
No, I hope I spoke slightly slower this week than last week. I listened back last week, and holy shit, if you kept up with that, good job. This week, I hope I've got a little bit slower. But yeah, there's so much to talk about. There's so many legends we didn't even get to. I'm sure if you do like this kind of lore aspect, this set must have spoken to you in some way. So I'm glad that everyone's out there enjoying and indulging.
Absolutely.
And if you're not, do, because this set's fantastic.
Yeah. If you do want to talk about more legendary guys, genuinely, we are on our Twitter every single day talking about legends and kind of interesting little topics that will then bleed into these episodes, like the Jury Blim talking about artist representation in the game. That was something that got kicked off from a random thought we had on our Twitter. So you can see a lot of the genesis for our ideas going on that platform. So do check us out, hit that follow button. Also, if you do find yourselves on YouTube, guys, we do have a YouTube channel, Magic the Flavouring on YouTube, nice and creative. Hit that subscribe button, and we do flavour cracker packs, individual lore episodes, and video versions of our interview episodes. As soon as we get our product, we will be cracking it open to do packed with flavour episodes based around Command Legends, so check those out. Other than that, guys, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.